Hi everyone. I'm very aware it's kind of very much Sunday morning, so it's really lovely to see as many people here. But yes, as you said, this is Modularized, authored narrative in a Proc-Gen World. It's going to be about the challenges and successes of writing for Shadows of Doubt. I'm Stark, I was the lead writer on the project, and since I know we have busy schedules, let's get going. We've got 30 slides in 30 minutes, so let's see if we can run through this all really quickly. So show of hands, who's heard of Shadows of Doubt? Oh, guys, this is amazing, thank you. That's a great show of hands. But for those of you who don't know, Shadows is a first-person detective stealth game set in a fully simulated kind of neo-noir sci-fi city, which means the city's layout, its citizens, their routines, murder cases, they're all procedurally generated with each new game upload, with each new game start. So usually when I say to people I'm the lead writer on Shadows of Doubt, the first thing they ask me is, how do you write for a game like that? And that's what I'm going to tell you, hopefully. But first of all, a bit about the team. This is us. So me, Stark Holborn, Cole Jeffries was the lead developer, Nick Diamond was on sound and music. And I think because the game is so ambitious, people assume it was made by a big studio, but it wasn't. This is us. This was the core team for most of the development, 3 people. We had lots of other people joining a bit later on, some extra programming and art, obviously, but this is the core for the most part. And you'll hear me talking about those names as we go on. But back to me, most importantly. So I was the writer on the game. I'm also a novelist, as well as being a games writer. I'm probably best known for my novel, Nunslinger, which it sounds like a very stupid pun, and I would love to say I set out to write a revisionist Western that, challenges all of the stereotypes of the genre, but really, the name came from a drunken night out. We got back from the pub, and there was a Western on TV with a nun, and someone said, Nunslinger, gunslinger, ha ha ha. And of course, me being me went, all right, and then I wrote a 200,000 word novel about it. But the point I'm making with this is that how it's a single kernel of an idea that can contain an awful lot of potential and information. So, Nunslinger. The narrative really is in the title. It's 2 things that have been put together that shouldn't work. So, nun with a gun in the West. It asks a lot of questions. And that's very much the case with Shadows. It's a sort of single kernel of an idea containing a lot of narrative potential. So Shadows of Doubt didn't start off as a first-person game. This is actually how it started off. It was a top-down, police station management game. Those are some very early screenshots there. And over the course of its life cycle, it changed a lot, and there's some really good snippets of information on Cole's dev blog. It takes you all the way back to here, to 2018. If you're interested in the life cycle of the game, do go and check that out. This is one of my absolute favourite things from the blog. I'm not going to read it all out, but he basically says that, we could put first person in here. We could let the player just walk around solving crimes, but where do you stop? A line has to be drawn somewhere. It's like, oh, Cole, you have no idea what's coming for you. This was written in 2018. The game actually came out in V1 at the very end of 2023. So this was a long time before the game actually came out. And what we realized as we started writing it is the more we got into the procedural generation, the sandbox element of it, that's where the game's strength lay. That's really what we should have been focusing on. So, especially when it came to, we got the tutorial mission working, it's scripted, and it was so hard to get the AI to do what we wanted within the Proc-Gen environment. So at that point, we made this decision. We started writing scripted missions for the whole game. This is all stuff that got written. It's all lots of content that was going to go in, and then we thought, no, out with all of that. No scripted missions anymore. All Proc-Gen. This was about 2021. We made that decision. So, out with that. And we ended up with Shadows of Doubt, an immersive, first-person, open-world detective stealth game in a fully simulated dystopian neo-noir city. How do we write for a game like that? I'm going to say, well, at least, like, this is what we did. Other people may have taken a very different approach. It comes down to three things. For me, anyway, what we did was figured out what we could control and maximized it to the very best of our ability. And in the case of Shadows of Doubt, that meant we were working with static content, we were working with dynamic content, and we were working with the AI systems. And the challenge was how to make all of that work together to kind of, to create the world and create the kind of space that the player is going to interact with. So, going back to the idea that a single kernel of an idea can contain an entire vast narrative, this is something I really tried to think about when it came to the static content. This is a quote from an artist, Senegalese artist called Issa Sam, who's amazing. He says, "Every object that's imported from one country to another, from one hand to another, from one sector or territory to another, is charged with its entire history." And he's saying that, story isn't everything. Inanimate objects tell the story of the world they're created in. And so, I mean, all of you here, if you look at your clothes, you look at your water bottle, the labels on things, they're telling the story of where they've come from in the world. And that's something we really had to leverage with Shadows, because we absolutely couldn't legislate for how players were going to interact with what they found. So we just had to sort of scattergun approach for world building and cram it into everything we could. So in Shadows, every single thing you can interact with, it all has a life, and it all sort of is telling the story of the world. So that's NPC chatter, it's graffiti, it's labels, it's item descriptions, forecasts, audio events, newspapers. This is how we had to tell the story of the world of Shadows of Doubt. We had to jam it into everything we possibly could, and so it means it's very granular world building. But it's what we did to try and make it as immersive as possible. On which note, oh sorry, there's an extra one there, item description, which I love writing. Everyone hates them, but I think they're great because, again, what an amazing opportunity for world building. You've probably heard this, show don't tell. Nope, sometimes that's not right. Does anyone know what this is from?
Master and Commander of the Wild Side of the World.
Yes, Master and Commander, and you gave it its full title, so thank you for that. Yeah, great film. But look, this is an absolute masterpiece of tell. Like it's giving us, it's not an info dump, it's just giving us exactly the information we need to get right into the heart of the film and get it started. So sometimes you just need pertinent information delivered at the right time, and this is what we had to do with Shadows. We have a little opening load screen. It has something inspired by this, and it's just enough information to tell the player where they are and get them sort of smack into the middle of the story. We had to rely on that. But this is a Proc-Gen game. Static content was only ever going to get us so far. We also had to work with a lot of dynamic content. And how were we going to achieve this? Well, the answer, and this is sort of the secret sauce of the game, really, is a thing called the DDS. It's the Dynamic Dialogue System, and Cole built this. It's a Unity bespoke editor, and it allows us to create kind of the blocks of written content that feature in the game, easily filter and apply variables. And it's a very flexible but very granular interconnected system. So it uses scope identifiers and word replacements. And you can, as you can see, you can break this down into kind of branching stuff, editable phrases. And it's kind of, small but powerful. It let us do a lot kind of within the written content of the game. Add into that, obviously, this is a game about solving a murder. So that's you've got a lot of information you're collecting about people in the city, about victims, about people who might have witnessed murder. So we had to focus on citizens as well. The game procedurally generates citizens. They will have likes, dislikes, best friends, enemies, jobs, hobbies. So this is when we used citizen data and like a personality model, hexco model, to give them all kind of characteristics, which then you suddenly have a bunch of NPCs, but then we can now filter by things like people who write bad poetry for fun, or hate their boss, or are really anti-capitalist or are very capitalist. Suddenly we have this living city full of people with quirks and afflictions and loyalties, which again, it adds to the verisimilitude, adds to the immersive nature of the game, and it provides us with the clues which you're going to be collecting as a detective. We combined all of that together, the word replacements and the citizen data. It means that a lot of the in-game elements can then be highly dynamic. So all of these show places where you'll find these word replacements. So in the newspaper accurately reports crimes in the city, does that by filling it with the citizen data. You get it in the ransom notes, in people's emails, V-mails in our case. And this one, a Todney. The game sometimes comes up with these brilliant things. It came up with the name Todney, and I just love it. I want to know so much about Todney. But it all enriches the game and makes it come alive with these details, makes every playthrough feel different. But anyway, title of this talk, Murder She Modularized. I was not kidding. I literally did have to modularize the act of murder to make this game work. So, here's some examples of what we ended up doing. So I had to figure out the scope identifiers for each murder. So that means like the victim's name, the place, the weapon. And we modularized right down to murder.adverb. So that's, can you be brutally shot? Yes. Brutally stabbed? Violently. So this was one of the darker elements of this job for me, sitting there at my desk going, what kind of adverbs can I use for this? But then those are pulled into the newspaper because the language in a newspaper is different from the language people use in the street. So we had to come up with very granular scope identifiers like that one. So it ends up being kind of like a game of Cluedo. You end up, if you have murder moniker, murder method, murder weapon, murder location, you end up with, the Red Gun Reaper who stabbed someone with a vintage sword at 101 John Doe Street. That's how the game pulls all of this stuff in. But we were very serious about the Proc-Gen nature of this game. And as a team, we're also quite extra. So we ended up doing a lot of stuff we didn't actually have to do. One of those things was on the TVs that play in the world, not only is there a bespoke noir film written for the game, so I wrote a noir screenplay, we had it voice acted, it's all set within the world of the game. It was one of the most fun things that we ever did. There's also a sports game that plays. It's a game called Basboul, which I made up. It's kind of this set in a world where the Bourbon Empire ruled for a long time. So it's like baseball crossed with pétanque, which is about as dangerous as it sounds. But we modularized a sports game as well. So it's actually, the game you hear on the TV is all Proc-Gen audio events. And this is what it looks like. We broke it down into separate audio events with different lines, which will play on a loop. It'll go through various events, and then it will loop round again. So you've even got procedurally generated sports audio coverage. Again, we absolutely did not have to do that, but we thought it would be fun. And then we were already down the rabbit hole with it, so we had to finish it and make it work. And that was one of the joyful things about working in such a small team on this game. We could make those decisions, and luckily the publisher was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, sure, you're doing that, great, fine. So that's kind of some of the modular and dynamic content we were working with. But, sorry, I don't know, there we go. I also said, so we had static content, dynamic content, AI systems. And I'm kind of going to stay in my lane with this one because I'm not a developer, I'm the writer. I don't know how all of the AI systems work. Cole could tell you better, but he's not here. But this is just to give an example, some of the very early working flowcharts. We used a lot of flowcharts, lots of documentation, which I'm a huge fan of. This just gives you an idea of how some of the AI killers work, the route it might take, in terms of like how the individual murders will come together. And I'm going to get to a bit later on why, when you're working with a Proc-Gen game, there are always going to be edge cases. There's always going to be jank. One of my favourite pieces of jank that happened in this game is murders weren't happening, and we couldn't work out why. And eventually we realised it was because the illegal weapons seller was the one place at night that had a toilet. And so there was all of the AI systems, they were all trying to go to the toilet, and it was so busy that the killer could not get in to buy a weapon. And so, you know, this is what I mean when I say the game will create stories of its own in this amazing way. And you can't always legislate for the fact that everyone's going to need a wee at like midnight. I just love the idea of the killer just going home again, being like, oh, I'll have to murder tomorrow then. But anyway, that's how it was meant to work. Did it always work like that? Not necessarily. But I think when I talk about Proc-Gen, when I talk about AI systems, I think a lot of people, especially if they're not from the games world, they assume I mean AI as in generative AI. They assume I mean LLMs, ChatGPT, stuff like that. And I don't, not at all. But a lot of people say to me, okay, well, Shadows is Proc-Gen. Why didn't you plug ChatGPT into it? And the answer is... I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you know, we're not going to plug ChatGPT. But one of the real reasons is it's hard enough legislating for an NPC who will say what and when and where to who, without chucking just a whole bunch of spam into the mix. This is also a game where data integrity is really paramount. So if an LLM freaked out and gave a bad entry, it could just throw their whole playthrough off. It could be a red herring, they might go down a path and then be really disappointed that actually the game's just chucked them something completely random. So that's my very brief explanation about why we didn't do that. Because this is a game about, oh, there we go. My other reasons why not to use LLMs in a game like this: data integrity, intentionality, and creativity. And I'm going to go a little bit more into some of these. And like I said, with the integrity, this is a game that's finding, it's looking for mistakes, it's trying to find information in a sea of data. And it's one of the mistakes people make early on is they think every single thing they find is relevant. So they're picking up batteries and pencil sharpeners and a receipt, and it's like, maybe none of that's relevant, maybe one thing's relevant. You have to use your detective skills to sleuth through what you're finding and add it in. And this is a quote I try to sort of keep in mind, a really good Toni Morrison quote about data and information, and it's how, you know, the creativity is what will give this data a soul. So you can have all this kind of these reams and reams of information, but without the creativity added into it, it's just facts. And that's going to get boring very quickly. So for us, integrity was important, but intentionality was also really important. These are some of the influences that went into Shadows of Doubt. And we were just really lucky with the team, because we shared a lot of creative vision. We shared a lot of inspirations. And so everything we did in the game was highly intentional. And we were always referring back to what were our touchstones, what were our markers for inspiration, to try and get the tone of the game right. I mean, these are amazing films. Brazil is a particularly important influence, kind of because it is satirical. We wanted to write something that was quite dark, but also funny in places. And so getting that tone right. You know, this is dystopian satire, so we wanted to kind of make sure we were hitting the right notes with it. And yeah, there are layers and layers and layers of details in Shadows. Because of the system, we could get incredibly granular with everything we were adding. And so we just tried to cram like creativity into absolutely everything we could. There we go. That's just another little thing there. But I think, and this is what we tried to keep in mind, again, with making the data creative, kind of using Gen AI to replace creativity is to replace magic with sterility. We wanted nothing to feel sterile in Shadows. We wanted it all to have a life. And, you know, some of that comes from what you want to do personally. It's like the film that plays on the TVs, it's called Claw of the Fathoms. I wrote it with, a female gumshoe detective because I wanted to write a gender-flipped noir. Like, normally it's a male detective, so I was like, right, I'm going to do the opposite. And that's come from me personally, my interests, my experiences. And it's just one of the ways that what you bring to the story is important. You bring yourself to the creative process, and that's one of the most important things you can do as a writer. One of the criticisms that gets levelled at Shadows is that it becomes repetitious after a while. And I think that's true. It can be true over many, many hours of gameplay. But for me, the question is, do you want a vivid, memorable, crafted 20-hour experience or quite a generic 200-hour one? I think this is the question to always ask. I'd much rather play something that was really memorable than kind of just be immersed in kind of undifferentiated slop, basically. And not everything needs to be infinite. I think there's a lot of focus on replayability. Shadows of Doubt works best when people role-play it and decide to do different styles of playthrough themselves. So it's not ever going to be infinite, and because it's a Proc-Gen game, there are always going to be potential pitfalls. So it's always going to be a balancing act between making it vivid and immersive, and then generic enough to make sense. This was exactly the case with the NPC dialogue, which can be quite challenging. So yeah, there are always going to be edge cases. I told you one of my favourites. There's always going to be jank, and it's just kind of figuring out how to handle that. And there are always going to be stories you don't expect coming out of it. Embrace the jank, in other words. Something we always try very hard to do. I think as well, jank, especially in a game like Shadows, it becomes part of the story we tell each other about a game. For me, I think it's sometimes really important. So it means that you're maybe pushing at the boundaries. If you've got edge cases and it's challenging, you're trying to do something different. And it's about players who then find and create and share their experiences with each other. And this is something AI can't do. AI can't share your experience of a game with another person. I mean, case in point here. Anyone remember what this is from? GoldenEye. And I remember getting stuck in that wall so many times in Facility. And like locking the butler in the fridge in the original Tomb Raider. Like, that wasn't part of the game, but we all did it anyway, because it's fun. But that's kind of jank, in a way. But it's an essential part of the story of the life of the game. And like I said, Shadows, I think, works best when people role-play it. These are some of my favourite Steam reviews here. I mean, yeah, 12 out of 10. It's great. Here's another one. And this is a longer one. I'm not going to read all of it, but like, I've killed multiple random people just for being rude to me. I've tied them up, stolen their things. I've slept with bums and caused them to get harassed after I make a bunch of noise throwing garbage. Escaped from hospitals without paying. Climbed through vents and stood in the closet and watched people. Filled my apartment with guns, skulls, and drugs. I've yet to even attempt to solve a single murder. And I mean, I love these, obviously, because it's people engaging with the game, but it's the way they're written, for me, which shows that we've done our job, because they're written in first person. So it's people saying, I did this, I broke into a flat, I stole the things, which means they're inhabiting the character of the detective. They feel like it's them doing these things. So this, for me, tells me we've absolutely done our job in making the game immersive. The more immersive it is, the more the experience is going to be rewarding. And hopefully, people will also forgive small elements of jank, because it's going to be part of the story of the game they tell somebody else. So, I've rattled through that really fast, because I was going to do, like, how are we doing for time?
You still good. You stopped
Okay.
5 minutes later, you've got about 5 minutes.
Fab. Okay, brilliant. Well, I will wrap it up. Yeah, there you go. 5.
I mean, if you finish, we can do Q&A in the next 5 minutes.
Okay, brilliant. So yeah, there we go. There's some NPCs dancing there, having a little jig. Oh, no, what's happened?
Oh,
My last slide. It was going so well. Oh, look, Jank is happening. Jank's happened right here.
Yeah, this lead's been playing up on us.
Is it back? No? Okay, well, I'll just do it without. So to sum up, you'll have to imagine the NPCs dancing there while I'm doing this. But it's find story in everything. Figure out what you can control and maximize that to the best of your ability. Be intentional with everything you do. Embrace jank. And try and build a world that will allow players to tell their own stories in it. And, if you do that, maybe you'll end up with a game that people might still be talking about in 20 years' time.
And there we have another of the joyous glitches we have over the weekend. Nothing destroyed yet, unless we can't fix that for the next speaker. But as I say,
I'm very proud to have destroyed your system.
We've got a few minutes, so that's a long table swapped in. So let's swap it back to the short one. If that was fine. It was only because someone wanted a laptop way over there that we put the long table on in the first place. Okay. So does anyone have any questions?
I think we might be on a loop, so you might want to...
Running so fast. Thank you. Thank you for an amazing talk. Really cool. The noir movie you made and the sports game that's generated.
Yep.
Just having been in game productions, this is it's hard to imagine how that comes about. how you find the time, how you make that decision, and how you get the publisher on board, and how the money is there to keep it running. Yeah.
I think a lot of it was because we were such a small team, and we did have such a we wanted to have aesthetic cohesion across the whole game. And this was during lockdown. We'd have our meetings in the park, so we'd walk round and round and round the park, pretending to be on our daily walks, but actually having meetings. We'd throw a lot of ideas out, and then we were all quite good at boiling it down to what was feasible within the time. And so, yeah, a lot of that is extra. We absolutely didn't need to do it at all. We were quite lucky in that we could convince the publisher. We were on track with a lot of things. It was icing, it's like icing on the cake. We didn't need to do it, but I think they agreed with us that part of the selling point of this game was going to be its immersive nature. So anything we could do to make it feel as much like a noir as possible was only going to be a good thing. And for me, even now, I still love walking around the city, and I'll hear that someone's got a TV on in an apartment and the film is playing, and it's so joyful. But no, we were just lucky. We were lucky that the publisher trusted us. They knew we could move quickly if we needed to, and they trusted us to know what was going to be good for the game in the long run. So this is published by Fireshine, who used to be sold out, in case anyone's interested.
Someone at the back had their hand up, I saw, before I ran up. No? Okay, so, right, so pass that along.
Thank you very much. Absolutely agree. It was a fantastic talk. I was really interested in what you were talking about engagement and how the players went off and did their own crazy stuff. I wonder if you have any thoughts about how important it is for the game to be responsive to those crazy choices, or where you want to plus with responsivity and where you maybe are like, okay, we can just let them lock the butler in the toilet and deal with it themselves. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a difficult balancing act. We want it to be as open world as possible, and that means we do let players do a lot. We let them open every drawer, we let them look in every cupboard, we let them pull stuff off bookshelves, go through trash. So we can legislate for a lot of that, and some of that we can do with barks, but they're not endlessly variable. The barks can work really well. But again, it's trying to be specific enough that they make sense in the right context and generic enough that they can cover a lot of eventualities. So it's that was a balancing act. I think once players know that it is very open world and that they can try to do a lot of stuff, if it doesn't necessarily always respond, I think maybe that's better than being too prescriptive. I think we're sort of giving them the keys to the city and being like, off you go and do this. And also, we've got a very active modding scene now. and we're very open to people modding the game and adding in their own content and things like that. So I think maybe that's part of it. People who are really interested in getting a responsive kind of game for a specific thing, they can maybe make that happen themselves in the future.
Okay, we're going to have to call it there. If you've got other questions for Stark, you're around the rest of the day, I hope?
Yeah, I'll be around.
So,
Come and say hi.